Listen up, Duck fans. Here's what's coming up on this episode of Once a Duck. Out and easy to one of those guys. All they have to do is, as you saw right there, make one guy miss and they have the speed to take it all the way to the end zone. All that and more coming up.
Your favorite place to take college game day? And I say every time, Eugene, Oregon.
That's right, Duck fans. We are back with another episode of the Once a Duck podcast. Your Oregon Ducks, they're coming off another tight ball game, beating the Boise State Broncos for the first time ever on a game-winning field goal. As always, here with you, Sam Schmidt, and of course, Nick Cody. Nick, how are you doing this week?
Oh, I'm doing pretty good, Sam. It was definitely a stressful game for me and my experience. We'll get into it a little bit later, but obviously for a lot of Duck fans out there, and we know because you guys have let us know at our social media handles, always at Once a Duck or at Nick R. Cody or at Samuel 101 TS. You can always hit us up there. We always appreciate when you reach out and let us know the feedback on the episodes, what you think the Ducks need to do in the upcoming game, and sometimes we'll incorporate those comments at the end of the episode. So for now, leave a comment, like, and subscribe, and let us know what you think about this episode currently that you're watching. Go back and watch all our previous episodes. We've got a lot of great ones out there. This one is going to be especially great because we're going to have to take the time to figure out, how do you get to great, Sam? How do you go from just having to win with three big special teams plays to getting to where you can win a rivalry game in September on the road? There's a big amount of improvement I think we're going to see and that we're going to have to see to get a win against the Beavers this week.
Well, improvement we have to see is something that I think we're going to get a lot into today. We're going to go over a lot of things, Duck fans. We are going to be talking thoroughly about the Oregon-Boise State matchup, including getting back to a little bit of tape time, our opportunity to look through a few plays and really be able to break down what we saw in that Oregon-Boise State matchup. Also, as always, we're going to talk about Oregon's upcoming game, a Civil War matchup, a classic rivalry in college football. There will be plenty to talk about from a history standpoint to a modernity to a classic Oregon State standpoint. But first, Nick, as we mentioned, we have to start with this Boise State game. Oregon comes away with a 3-point victory at home. I think a lot of people kind of expected a little bit more, but Ducks still got out of there with a win. Tell us a little bit about just kind of initial thoughts on that game from last week.
Oh man, especially because I had to go back and rewatch the first half as I was busy at the time, and unable. And then unfortunately, the most of the second half I was able to catch, but on a bus in transit, which was very frustrating, as we were able to discuss a little bit after that. But in looking back, I always have to start off with the positives. I am again impressed with our defensive line and our commitment on the defense entirely. For a very talented and now, a dark horse Heisman candidate and a running back, they were able to contain him a lot of times. And there are a few plays we'll get into here in our breakdown that, he obviously was going to bust loose, but ended up being able to get the win. And I wanted to see some big special teams plays, and we certainly did. As we basically had a matchup of former friends that became special teams coordinators there. So congratulations to everybody that made those special teams plays possible. But it's very tough when you have to rely on three big special teams plays to get you the win, and it's not something you can count on every single game, as many Oregon fans know. For especially when you put it on the kicker at the end, Oregon fans are always going to be a little bit uncomfortable. So, what was it like in your experience, Sam?
Well, I'll tell you what, Nick. It was a late night at Autzen, and I got to tell you, it was probably one of the most high energy, best environment out of conference games I've been to in a long time. Duck fans were ready for this one. They were having fun. I don't know if it's just the second week of $6 beers, everybody understanding where exactly to get the good stuff from around the stadium. But I'll tell you what, it was a really, really excited atmosphere. There was a ton of blue in Eugene. There was a lot of Boise fans that were there. They were excited. But I'll tell you what, when Oregon fans were loud, they were loud. And I really mean this. It seems as if there was a fair number of Duck fans that happened to hear the comments made by now Miami quarterback Cam Ward the week leading up to the game about how playing at Florida wasn't a big deal because he had played at Oregon, played at Washington, played at these high pressure environments. And I think some Duck fans took that to heart, and they made sure that was the case on Saturday night. It was one of the first times before students were there that I can remember the crowd really being loud when the other team was in the huddle throughout the entire game. It seemed like the moment that the band stopped playing and the teams getting huddled up and everyone was getting ready, it got loud and it got excited. And Austin kept that energy throughout the entirety of the night. It was a lot of fun to be able to check out the crowd and be able to check out everybody enjoying Oregon football in that way. As for the game itself, I think I sit where a lot of people do. It was a little frustrating. There were definitely moments where Oregon seemed, especially in that second half, like they were going to be able to extend the lead or push things to a point where it might become a little bit more comfortable. But then because of inevitable mistakes, they weren't able to do such, whether it was the pair of fumbles, whether it was the sacks that were given up throughout the game, whether it was a couple of times just not being able to get off the field on third down, or more importantly than that, not being able to keep Boise from picking up chunks on first down that made second, third down so much easier. That was a thread we saw throughout the entirety of the game. We're going to go through and talk about it piece by piece, but as you mentioned, Ashton Gentry, absolutely incredible game, was able to continue his theme of just dominating opponents throughout this 2024 season thus far. 25 carries, 192 yards, 3 touchdowns. Breaking off a 70-yarder is going to help those numbers. But if you even take that away, you still have a really, really impressive night from a running back who's going to be playing at the next level.
Yeah, you have a night there that you'd expect, if you take that away, that you'd expect out of an Oregon back. But oh man, it didn't seem like until we kind of shuffled some things around we could get that run game going. And to get into the negatives here, man, any offensive line guy that sees 4 sacks in the first half, and especially in my situation, seeing it kind of from my feedback on my phone and my notifications, from texts from friends, man, that was rough. Guest of last week, Mark Asper, sent me a couple texts too. And I was just thankful at the time that I was focused on comedy. I was in the pocket because I was faring better in the pocket on stage than it seemed like Dylan Gabriel was in the first half there. So we'll get to a little bit about that in our breakdown. But that was very frustrating to see. And then obviously, talented running back, but you gotta contain him. I was really impressed with certain individual plays where it seemed like we had the rest of Boise's offense completely figured out, but there was just those moments, and the defense, I believe, has just continued to improve, and I think they'll continue to. Offense is certainly has a lot more room to grow that we haven't seen yet with the talent that's on the field.
Well, I completely agree with you on that. There are so many talented players out there, very few of which have really seen what I would be willing to call a full opportunity to show what they can do, just based on the situations Oregon's offense has been in this year. And I think that there's a lot of talent that is really waiting to spread its wings for this Oregon team. Nick, before we get into a real breakdown going through, not quite drive by drive, but at least quarter by quarter through this Oregon game, let's get into our guys of the games a little bit. Talk about some of the players that really impressed us in that matchup with Boise State. I'll let you go first. Who were some of your guys of the game that you were really seeing perform?
Somebody that's kind of, I guess, overall stood out now is the transfer from Michigan State, Derek Harmon. I think that guy's just been incredible to watch, and really helped a lot of times with the physicality. So in a lot of those short yardage situations, I was impressed even with sometimes Boise getting the points, with just how hard our defense was willing to make them work for it, and just was really, I mean, we were stout at the line of scrimmage when that guy was in the game, and all the defensive line been very impressed, but he stood out to me.
Derek Harmon was great last week. The only thing that from him that at all got under my nerves was the roughing the passer, a little bit of a hands to the face moment.
Yeah.
Beyond that, a very productive game out of Harmon. A guy that I'm going to go with, who I think a lot of Duck fans have been giving some credit to this week, and I think he deserves all of it. Devin Jackson was very impressive in that.
Yeah.
Game.
Oh, yeah.
Very, very impressive. Playing in that linebacker position, he was one of the few people who was consistently bringing down Gentry. He actually had a tackle for loss against him, something that not a lot of Ducks were able to say they were able to do against Ashton Gentry. Also, and I think it was pointed out pretty well by the Big Ten media, and you can go back and watch Urban Meyer break it down in full, but the way that he was getting out and blocking on some of those special teams plays, specifically the Noah Whittington return, just really, really impressive stuff there. We know he's a sprinter. We know he's a track athlete. But my God, Devin Jackson, 5 tackles. 2 of them were by himself, as well as that tackle for loss, pass deflection as well. He's been all over the place, and I'm really, really excited to watch more of 26 in the coming weeks.
Yeah, and he's got that kind of speed he demonstrated in that play where he makes it look easy. And yeah, I think a lot of people don't understand that that's really the separation between the guys that can really fly. They just make it look kind of effortless on their parts. So my number 3 was going to be Noah Whittington, but you got to finish the play, guys. You got to cross the goal line, give the ball to the ref, go celebrate with your teammates. To echo the voice that I still hear in my head from Chip Kelly to this day. But in that place, I got to give the heads up play. Jordan Lamar going over there, picking up the football, making sure we get it. Next time, I hope everybody who jumps on that damn football. I know that, that was one of those moments as I'm trying to get home to try and watch the game at home and at least catch the end. That was a moment there where I just like, oh no, okay. All right. I don't know how the experience was. I've heard replay has not been really good in Autzen this season. What was your experience like on that play?
All right. Well, we'll break down the actual play itself and how it worked out later when we review the film of it. But I'll tell you just from a fan perspective what happened. Number one, everybody was losing their minds. Obviously, everyone was going crazy. Everyone was freaking out. And actually, that corner of that end zone is like right by down where I sit at. So it was like that was all right in front of us. And it was so loud in there. When the ref announced why they were reviewing the play, nobody heard it. Nobody heard why. Yeah. Everybody just heard they're reviewing the play. And so everyone's expectation is the crowd, or at least where I was, are they trying to say he stepped out of bounds? He for sure didn't step out of bounds. We're all right here. We know he didn't step out of bounds. Like that could. And so they confirmed it, and everyone was like, oh, yeah, of course they did. Of course they confirmed it. And it didn't occur to anybody, at least where we were, that had even happened until maybe about 3 or 4 minutes later. I was scrolling through my phone in the break, like the timeout, and all of a sudden it showed up. Took a real close look at it, and that was absolutely a fumble at about the half-yard line. Yeah, Jaden Lamar was able to pick up and save the day on that play. So yes, it was surprising. It was shocking. It was more of a thing of like, I can't believe we got away with that afterwards. Less so than like in the moment, if you will.
The game of inches, my friend, and that inch there is one you cannot just tempt fate with, because as Duck fans, long time, we've seen it before. We've had some of those go for us and some against us. So gotta cross the goal line, make sure you do it, and secure the ball all the way, man. Jeez. Yeah, I probably almost had a heart attack at that moment myself. So I'm glad you guys got to enjoy it.
We got to enjoy that moment a little bit. I will say that was that, and I will say just the returns alone, like the level of excitement that those plays brought, that had to have led into the overall atmosphere at Autzen tonight. It was so crazy just to feel the energy on those returns. The Tez Johnson one, I'll just say, was crazy in and of itself, because by the time that he cuts all the way back across the field, very few, I'm not looking at where Tez is. I immediately shoot my head back to look, how many flags are there on the field? Because inevitably somebody held somebody. There's no way he was just able to get all the way across like that. And then it wasn't until he was probably at the 20 we look back and just, there's no flags. This is going to be a score. This is going to count. So special teams wise, it definitely brought the energy to Autzen on Saturday night. One more player I want to get to before we get past our guides of the game. Guy with a lot of expectations when he came in, showed a little bit of what he's going to be able to do. We hope to see more of it. Evan Stewart.
Yeah,
5 catches,
sure.
112 yards, had the 67-yarder down the sideline to get that first touchdown drive going, had the touchdown grab as well a little later on. We're going to take a deeper look at that play, but want to give a lot of credit to Evan Stewart showing off exactly why he was the highly touted transfer he was.
Absolutely, man. And overall, I just hope we get to see more of the depth of this passing game, and definitely glad to see him stand out. But yeah, especially going on the road, it's going to be important to get a lot of these receivers involved in the ball game.
Oh, it will be. And I have to say, just like looking at Oregon from last week, with the amount of talent this team has, it is sort of surprising that there are 3 receivers that caught passes the other night.
Yep.
Evan Stewart had 5, Trayshawn had 4, Tez Johnson had 3 for -1 yards.
Yeah.
That's not doing a good job of putting playmakers in a position to be successful. You especially with the amount of guys that you also have on that roster. Also receiving passes, of course, you had Terrence Ferguson with 3, Kenyon Sadiq with 2, and Patrick Herbert with the 1.
Yeah. And at times it felt like, man, sometimes we're getting a little uncomfortable with how much we are doing pre-play, how the tempo changes throughout the game. I just feel like when I'm watching and trying to figure out and pinpoint why aren't we doing what I think our expectations are, it feels so much of that is happening pre-play, and I'm not sure if guys are just uncomfortable, not sure what they're doing, or if you're just waiting that long to, get up there and have the play clock rolling when you're trying to look at what the defense is doing. I'm not sure, but we'll get into some of it in the film review and some of my theories on it after. But got to clean it up because the Beavers want us bad. Just announcing that the Pac-12 will be reformed, adding 4 more schools to them in Washington State. So the Civil War and Apple Cup are huge, huge games to the underdogs. And I think the perception this weekend is that it might not mean as much to the Ducks. But I'm telling you, man, oh, better, better, better not be that way for the team, because it sure isn't that way for the former players and for the fans, because there's no way you can overlook the Oregon State Beavers if you're the Oregon Ducks.
Well, I think we heard it best from, this week's uniform model, the local kid, dual sport athlete. Bryce Betcher broke it down. By the way, Bryce, 9 total tackles the last game, 3 of them solo, a pass breakup. He's been really, really good. He's just kind of been doing all the dirty work Oregon needs him to do so far throughout this season.
The trigger on the smoke screen, especially, it was like that. It was fantastic.
Yes, the tackle and getting in there, absolutely. Huge play. Yeah. Huge play. But I think he really, I think, voiced something that made me feel a lot more confident in this game. And it was that it seemed himself and this whole Oregon team was really looking at this one quite seriously.
Yeah.
I think it was kind of clear about the Idaho game that maybe that's not exactly where this team's head was at, perhaps. And the Boise State game, well, you know what? Let's just say this. Oregon's never beaten Boise State, but Boise State's also never beaten a Big Ten team. Took a little bit of both pieces of magic to make that one happen.
Interesting statistics.
Now, what I will say, and what I do have to add on, is I think the recency and the recent history of this Oregon State rivalry makes me feel a little better about things.
Yeah.
Love hearing about the bulletin board material, if you will, that Coach Lanning's been using. Still all the way back from 22, but still quite relevant to a lot of the guys in that locker room.
Yeah, man, just got to be able to also realize that, some of that energy can be wasted, and that there's nothing that can prepare you for, especially Coach Lanning hasn't even been in a full Reser Stadium yet. Nobody that's been a Duck has had to play this game with the way it is expected to be. And this is their Super Bowl for sure. And that chainsaw is probably going to be ramped up a couple more notches, couple more decibels, make everybody that much more annoyed by it. But Yeah, it always is and always should be a tradition, regardless of what conferences we're in. And that's why it should always be, you'd like to think a game where anybody could potentially win it, especially when you're the home team.
Nick, you're absolutely right about that. And we're going to get into a lot more Oregon and Oregon State here in just a little bit. For now, though, we've gotten to that point. It's time to enter our film room, do a little tape time here on the Once a Duck podcast. We've got a few big plays from the last week's game that we want to talk about. In the first place, I want to start just moving kind of chronologically through this game. Early in about the in the second quarter, early in the second quarter, Oregon had back-to-back sacks
Yeah.
that really, really blew up a drive when it seemed Oregon, they had just scored on their last drive. Boise had scored. It seemed like the Ducks were trying to get themselves into a rhythm, and frankly, it didn't. It fell apart because of these two straight plays. Let's walk through them a little bit. Tell us what you're seeing here, Nick, especially from an offensive line perspective of what these guys are seeing and having to deal with.
Yeah, so the first one we're going to be looking at here, we're at second down and we've got 7 yards, right? Manageable. You're kind of on schedule for what you want to be doing. Maybe we'd like to have a little more yardage there to be able to play with, but hey, great passing down. We come out and the Boise front is showing us three down defensive linemen, two guys potentially that could come off the edge, and one middle backer. Kind of simple, and you can break it, basically see right away with the depth of all the defensive backs there that those are not threats to come. You can instantly tell yourselves right there, all right, whatever rules we have in this pass protection, we should be able to pick this up. But as the play goes, essentially they bring a delayed blitz from the middle linebacker and basically get enough push to get right back into our backfield. It gets at Dylan Gabriel. Now, does the football probably need to get out a little faster there, or maybe uh, do we have to escape the pocket? I don't know what essentially their protection was there, but you have to trust, especially with delayed blitz, whatever your rules are. If it's going to be a five-man protection, that usually means the backside tackle is going to have to squeeze, but it's going to be most important. It's just dependent on how, who are the most pertinent threats to the quarterback. Who's the closest and cause the most potential damage to the quarterback right now? That's what your scheme should always pick up as an offensive lineman. So I don't know how much of that was, miscommunication, not preparation. Didn't get to see too much pre-play there for how much or what they were calling out, if they were making a point call or anything. But that one, tough to see. And then, following it up, you get, third down and you already know everybody's going to be coming at you after your quarterback. There's nothing you can do when it's third and long except pass rush. And if you don't utilize that with some kind of screen, the quarterback has to get the ball off if there's just that edge guy coming around late. Because as we said earlier, you got to take the most essential closest guys to the quarterback off the line of scrimmage. Your rules have to dictate that. And when that extra guy is coming off the edge, that needs to be sure your quarterback is recognizing it, throwing hot, or getting out of there.
So what I want to look at right here is, especially on that second play, the second sack, the one on third down, we see the rusher come around the edge. We see it looks as if Ferguson is throwing maybe like a half a block, maybe he's showing block and then trying to get out of the way. What are you seeing there? What do you think is supposed to be happening on that play? And then what breaks down in order to make that end up as it does?
I mean, typically right there, you're trying to get maybe the timing was off, but that's where that should be your hot throw right there. Ferguson right there out there. He has that back there to make a move in a one-on-one situation. I like Ferguson's chances against somebody from Boise State. So, and I like his chances against somebody from the Big 12, Big 10, Big 12, whatever conference you're going to put out there. You get Ferguson the ball right there and out of your hands. I believe we've got, the potential to pick up some yardage. Probably not a first down, but field position wise, you're going to be able to punt the ball, get Boise pinned right back at, inside their 20-yard line. A lot easier if you pick up some yardage there. Going backwards is always just that much worse. And getting your quarterback hit, tough, very tough.
Well, the good news is the next play we have to look at, it's going to be a little bit more fun for Duck fans to be able to review. This one, it's going to be the Dylan Gabriel to Evan Stewart touchdown pass. This one, I got to say, in person, watching the play unfold, it was one that seemed a little bit scarier in person, admittedly, just because it was tough to see the exact angle. But going back and looking at it on the replay, really an impressive throw and grab here. Tell us a little bit about what you're seeing, both from a protection standpoint, Oregon actually doing quite a good job of keeping Gabriel clean in this play, and then also what's developing for Stewart as the route unfolds.
So, especially what I liked about this one is this one's on first down. It was right after a turnover, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So the thing I really love about it is, eh, as an offensive lineman, first I got to say, don't enjoy the dance. Man, if you're going to give yourself a dance opportunity, it's got to look better than that. Go celebrate with your teammates. But breaking that down from a protection standpoint, what's great here is you have the opportunity on first down when you sell the run and the play action, you're able to get the defense to move up, creep up, and take those shots deep. And when you do it after a turnover, they're just going to be that much more triggered by the run. So what we have here with the backside pulling guard, I think it was Harper. You have him pulling across, influencing the linebackers. They instantly step up. The safeties are left there and put in terrible situations that you don't want to have to make those kind of decisions in a split second or be a step off. And when you have that play action, that's what it does. It influences. And when they expect to run on first down, especially, you see that pulling guard, you're already going to influence those guys. And especially up front, it really helps to be able to be aggressive in your pass set and then settle up and then keep the man in front of you. That was always, especially in, my offensive days with Coach Kelly, that was always kind of the much easier than just your standard 5-man pass protections. Always easier to influence them to think, oh my goodness, it's a run. Then they have to kick into pass rush mode.
And just a quick correction on that, it was this was immediately after the Tez Johnson punt return right up the middle. Got about
Yeah.
4 yards on there. Was
Yeah.
able to pick up a chunk when it looked like he was going to be brought down pretty immediately. That turned out to be a little bit of a theme as the game went on. The next play that we're taking a peek at right here, it's going to be the very next score for Oregon. That would be a Trayshawn Holden touchdown, catch, and run.
Yeah, man. And just the burst of speed right there, kind of just breaks it right there between two defenders, gets there to right to the end zone, the opposite side of where you were probably seated at,
Exactly.
and gets the high five on the way rolling in like that. That was fun. Definitely, it was good that like we definitely didn't see these explosives in week one. And if we can keep on this trajectory, it feels like we could see even more going into next week. So, man, it's a good sign.
I completely agree with you. And seeing those kind of explosive plays are something that at least brought me some closure, knowing that it's possible. Knowing that those things can happen is always huge. Something that I noticed on this touchdown to Trayshawn Holden, it really looks as if Boise State, they're doing something that they did a little bit throughout the game, which was really just throw everything in the kitchen sink at Dylan Gabriel. Throughout the game, there were times like we saw earlier, those first clips where that kind of a style worked and they were able to get there. On this one, though, seems like Oregon actually reads it pretty well, picks it up pretty well, then are able to take advantage of Trayshawn Holden and that speed. From an offensive line perspective, what are you looking for there? What tips you off that rush is going to be coming right there? And then from just an offensive perspective in general, Gabriel being able to try to find that particular receiver in that space.
Yeah, this clip isn't as good as the other one at showing you the there's not a pre-snap to show you, but the safety alignment. Again, the reason this is able to be a successful play is we pick up everybody, and then there's so much space and cushion that the defense has to give us in the defensive backfield that with the athletes that Oregon has at wide receiver, that's a big risk to take. And if you can get the football delivered out and easy to one of those guys, all they have to do is, as you saw right there, make one guy miss and they have the speed to take it all the way to the end zone on any given play.
Well, I think the speed even might have surprised the defender a little bit. It looks like he doesn't take necessarily the best angle right there. 2 steps later, Trayshawn's by him. And I don't know if there's very many people in the country that are going to be able to catch that guy once it's in the open field. The long stride alone, he's going to get there in fewer steps than you possibly could.
Yeah, if you take that negative step, especially against a guy with that kind of speed, it's going to be a bad day for you. It's going to be a really bad day.
The next one we're looking at, I think this is a fun one for Oregon fans for sure. going to be Tez Johnson doing something that, well, let's just say we know he's capable of, and he shows us why with this play. Something that I think was super, super fun about this one, and it's something that I've noticed over the last few years with Oregon football. For many, many years, including when you played there, Nick, there was a very specific style in which Oregon liked to return, especially punts. Very
Yeah.
much, very much aiming toward getting toward the middle of the field and being able to use the spacing at either side or be able to just to take it directly up the middle of that defense. Think about the amount of punts over Oregon history you've seen, whether it was a Keenan Howery or a Pat Chung or a Cliff Harris, Braylon Addison. A lot of the times you saw a guy trying to get to the middle right there. I'm not sure if that's necessarily intended here, but because of the way that the defenders are, the way it works out, that's exactly where Tez Johnson ends up being. Walk us through a little bit of what you see on this punt return, Nick.
Yeah, well, especially when you've got two special teams coaches out there. Coach Lorig probably had this dialed up, and it was probably expecting some kind of big special teams to play in this game. Not just two, but there's always that feeling sometimes special teams coaches give going into a week where they know they've seen something on film and they've coached it up to their players and gotten to see it successfully executed in practice. And that's the kind of only way you can have this happen. And there's so many blocks set up here by just everybody being in the right position and all understanding where the trajectory of the kick is going, and all sticking with it, trying to find business and find work if they aren't on it already. And just a fantastic job, obviously, of the returner just going out there, making some plays and following their blocks when they got into open space. And yeah, when you can cross the field like that, the entire punting team, they're going to have to really trust those guys getting down there first to at least get on the returner, and if not, you're going to be in trouble with the athletes Oregon has traditionally.
Well, you're going to be in a lot of trouble, and I think that's clear even just from the first moment. I think the first Boise gunner down there is almost a little bit surprised that he doesn't fair catch it.
Yeah.
You even see him like slow up a little bit, expecting that, and he doesn't do it. Tez makes him miss, and then all of a sudden he's got the lane through the blockers, gets out around, and then it's all speed from there. As I mentioned earlier, that was a big play where we had to look back and go, are there flags? There has to be a flag on this. Somehow no flag. Oregon ends up with a huge touchdown in a moment when they definitely needed it there in the third quarter.
Yep. And then I also, it's just those kind of plays again, the like you said, in Oregon history, especially games where we've won those with Cliff Harris touchdowns, or some a big Walter Thurman the third pick. There's just been those moments like it changes games, and we needed it when you look back at this game in the box score, because yeah, when you win by 3 points and you get it with a one of the best punt returns that I've seen in Oregon history, that's a little bit concerning and shows you how hard that Boise defense played.
Well, and while we're talking about the special teams, Nick, I want to say special teams, they were certainly special. They were very special this past week. Special, though, it doesn't mean great across the board, because there were some things that definitely stuck out. While Oregon's return game was really good, the coverage continues to still be a little bit of an issue. How do you shore up that while continuing to give the credence to the return side and give them the credit they deserve?
Well, one of the biggest things overall in special teams is just guys, wanting it that bad. And in, Oregon traditionally, that's never been an issue. And some of the best players on our defense or even our offense are out there on the special teams units. And sometimes it's just about putting those guys in the right positions to make plays. And other times it's just about what efforts in the week are you putting in special teams and scouting your opponents and what they tend to do. So those things are always huge, especially going into a rivalry week where, you're going to expect probably some trick plays are there in the book for both teams.
Well, Nick, moving ahead, we go at least on our thing. We're moving ahead a little bit here. We've got a play that I think a lot of Duck fans, we've seen it a few times, so I have to look at it one more time. Ashton Gentry going for 70 yards right here. Skipping ahead, just even pre-play, you see they have it lined up. It looks like a run formation, a power set. You see the receiver go in motion from the left to the right, excuse me. immediately right here, it feels like run. It already looks like run. It's the first play after a turnover, and
Yeah.
boom, it turns into a huge run. What do you see pre-snap, and then as the play gets started, what are you seeing their line do so well that opens up the hole for Gentry?
Well, I think I would wish we had the back angle of this, but it does seem like we get maybe a little bit of holding call on the guard inside there, but we do get penetration right there from on the left side of their offensive line. Problem is when you have that kind of penetration, who has to fill that gap and what are the responsibilities? So if you get too far upfield in those situations, especially a delayed run or a counter or something with some kind of motion or action that pulls the linebackers away. Those are the kind of things that can create these big gaps. And when you have a talented running back that can find any kind of hole, yeah, that gap's just going to get bigger with that kind of penetration. And then obviously, I think having the nose go to the same side as that penetration just makes it tough. And some of it's just scheming right. A lot of it is you just have a talented back that, as soon as he got it, just cut right inside, and then it's one cut and go.
Well, and you see as the play develops, the hole opens up. You've got those three blockers, all the Gentry's right there. It looks as if Johnson is in the safety position. Is he supposed to be shading out to the left right there, or is that a guy who's supposed to be filling that hole right there?
It really all depends on schematically and but again, if you're playing Boise State and it's first down, I'm going to keep as many people close to the interior of the box as possible. I'm not going to be so much influenced by that wide receiver widening out as they were, it seems, in this play. But ultimately, man, I think it was just I think the angle taken by the right outside linebacker, or yeah, hard to see the numbers, but I think just ultimately could have filled it right there. But even then, you got to, even squaring up one on one in a situation with a back like that, it's not something that you want to have to rely on.
And I completely agree with you there. And thanks talking about things you don't want to have to rely on. Immediately after this play, Oregon was able to respond with, well, one of, I'm willing to say, excuse me, not after this play, it was after the
Not
next
after,
Boise
yeah,
touchdown, the next Gentry score,
yeah.
after they would take a 34 to 27 lead, excuse me. We have the play that, well, it exploded on social media for every reason we mentioned earlier. And it is the kick return from Noah Whittington. Believe it or not, this was another one where it looked like he was headed up the sideline, probably in a position to get pushed toward the out of bounds, runs into his own man, is forced to cut back inside. All of a sudden, Red Sea opens up right there. What are you seeing on this one?
I mean, he gets the guy a pancake in my view there. I love it. Really, it's like a kind of like the truck stick was transitioned through the block into the player. You gotta love that. So put it on the board. And there, it's been broken down. Everybody said it. Just the speed there, the way the finish at the end. Just gotta finish with the ball in the end zone. Never drop it. Never drop it. It's nobody's going to be that much more impressed if even if you're able to time it up perfectly right there at the inside -1 yard line. You got to get it across, especially, we don't have Pac-12 referees for the conference, but might have, a case of the Pac-12 referees this week, so you never know. You don't want to put it in the referee's hands.
Well, two plays that we're not gonna go over in film wise, but I do want to give a shout out.
Yep.
With about 7.5 minutes left, a huge sack. Jordan Birch getting credit for it, but Tudo ultimately getting the pressure there to make that a difficult situation. Big credit to him. Also, big credit to as well goes to Brandon Johnson III getting a huge pass breakup on a play where he honestly wasn't in the area at all and was able to get over there late in that game to force a punt that became the drive that Oregon used to seal the game. Also, shout out to the former Beaver, Atticus Tappington, missed an extra point early in the game, was nailed when it mattered, hit the game-winning field goal.
Yep. And yeah, as Jeff Schwartz pointed out, yeah, on Twitter, former guest of the show, go back, check out that episode. There is that stigma, no matter where you come from, if you're an Oregon kicker, it's always something. But when it matters, if you're clutch, that's what counts and that's what people remember. That's what you get carried off the field for. So yeah, great kick and love to see that when it matters. And that way you have that confidence, going into the season where, especially as we know, looking around the Big Ten Conference, kicking is important, if not the entire lifeblood of some offenses.
It I certainly agree, Nick. That's the best way I can put that. I certainly agree with you there. Being able just to have that make also just in the back of his mind, especially going into some weeks where he's probably going to need some big ones, will be huge. Before we move on, Nick, do you have any final thoughts about this Oregon Boise State matchup?
There's going to be a lot to um, obviously for the team to work on, improve on. Hopefully they're going to be able to find it. But also a reminder to everybody that just first two games of the season, I think there's a lot of misnomers out there of I think fans that just expected so much more from a team like this on paper. But just to remind those fans, we've had worse starts. I being a part of two of those, being the Boise State loss in 2009 to open our season, and then the LSU loss to start the 2011 season. And both of those, my friend, ended up in Rose Bowl appearances, one Rose Bowl win, turned it around. But some of those games weren't too pretty to start. Took a while for us to gel. Particularly remember that Purdue game, the Utah game after. It wasn't until Cal, that 2009 game, that we really found our offensive rhythm. And I think could take a couple games, but right now, having your rivalry game, more important time than ever to ramp things up, show everything you've got in the offensive playbook that you've dialed up all off season, all fall camp. This is the time to use it.
Well, and I think being able to put all of that together, especially for a big rivalry game like Oregon has coming up, will be big time. Just because you mentioned it, it popped in my head, and I wouldn't be able to not acknowledge it. Maybe this is somebody to think about come Purdue week coming up. But you mentioned those close games against Purdue and Utah, and I'd always love to shout out a Duck who maybe doesn't get the most attention. So shout out Andre Crenshaw coming through big in those couple of games early in that 2009 season.
Yeah, you got to love that backfield. You get some Crenshaw, you get some Remine,
Some young Mike, very fun.
Mike. You got Kenyon obviously there and have getting moved over from the defensive backfield. So yeah, very very fun, and we'll obviously a good idea, maybe some ideas for guests in the future. So, but we'll get to that when we get to that.
What it's time to get to now, though, Nick, Oregon versus Oregon State, the Ducks and the Beavers, one of college football's most played rivalries. Two teams that don't like each other. They've said as much this week heading into this ball game. So Oregon State team, members of the Pac-12, might not be exactly the team Oregon State was last year, but still a team with some very talented players. What I've noticed from Oregon State, I've watched a significant amount of both of their games this year. This is going to be a grind you out kind of team throughout this year. They might not have all the same personnel or all the same coaches that they had, but the guys that are there, most of them have the same teaching, the same coaching within them. Their offensive line, they might not have the bodies, but they still play with the veracity, with the strength, with the aggression that Oregon State's offensive line played with the last couple of years. And their running game has showed off as much. Griffin and Hankerson have been an awesome 1-2 punch for them. 249 yards so far through two games for Griffin, 226 for Hankerson, 3 touchdowns apiece for those two players. Through the air, it's been mostly McCoy that's been slinging the ball for them, 25 of 36 through two games for 2 touchdowns, 295 yards. The Beavers are not probably going to try to throw on you all day. They're going to be running the ball, and they're going to be trying to play the most sound fundamental defense that they can. Nick, first and foremost, what sticks out to you about this upcoming game for the Ducks and the Beavers?
Well, if you're going to be watching our tape and our tape from this season, and you are the former quarterback of Idaho, you've got to be familiar with that defense. So you're probably feeling pretty confident with what you can see on both sides of the ball against that personnel matched up. So that's one thing I could take away. And then with the coaching change, Trent Bray taking over for Jonathan Smith, who went on to Michigan State, it's so important for those guys and the culture of that program. This game means everything to them, that they not only win it, but they win it their kind of way, which is, like you said, grind it out, wear the teams down, keep, everybody, on their heels the entire time. It's a lot like a Shannon Sharp Instagram live, just wearing away, pounding. Everybody wants it to stop, and it just keeps on going, just like sometimes that chainsaw. So it's important for this Oregon team to get into successful situations and put themselves in the best position to keep the chains moving, avoid long third downs where that chainsaw just becomes incomprehensible for your offensive line communications, on top of all the noise going on out there from the fans. So big week, big matchup, and you never see it this early. So it's going to be very interesting to see how both teams match up that way.
Two points off of what you just said, Nick. Number one, do you think that they play the chainsaw a little extra loud after Marcus Harper called it a weed whacker this week? Also, number two, you just mentioned playing the game this early in the year. Do you know the last time Oregon and Oregon State played and it wasn't November or December?
Ooh. So they're definitely turning the noise up, especially, they didn't just actually go and rebuild half a stadium, not to probably put some kind of noise device in there to make it worse. But no, and then no, I couldn't tell you. It would have to, I'd imagine it would have to be pre-Pac-10.
Well, I'll tell you what, Nick, it was post World War II, but just by about a month or so. I'll tell you that.
Okay.
The first college
Wow.
football season back after the big war. If you go back and look through the records, it's a little bit of a break during the 43 and 44 seasons, as you could probably expect. The first matchup between Oregon and Oregon State, or at least I should say the most recent, took place on October 13th, 1945, in
Wow.
Corvallis, Oregon. The middle game in what actually was a 5-game win streak for the Beavers in the rivalry throughout the early 40s.
Interesting. I've got a piece of trivia for you now.
I will say, though, hold on, Nick, really quick.
Oh.
This was also the last year that Oregon and Oregon State played twice in a season.
Oh, wow. Yeah,
I apologize.
May it never happen again, but with the way the playoff structure is, it could.
It could.
That would be crazy. But yeah, long time from now till we have to worry about that. Long road ahead. But my trivia question for you is, do you know the last time both of these teams walked into the game formerly known as the Civil War undefeated?
I'm going to have to say, my guess is going to have to be that same 1945 season, because I can't imagine time they would have played each other that early. If not that, then maybe never.
1933, my friend. Way
Oh my
before.
goodness. Do you mean to tell me the 13-3 matchup that took place in Portland, Oregon?
Sir, I just know the trivia. It's just ingrained in there. One of those unfortunate things you can't get rid of haunts you at night.
Well, and I'll tell you this, credit to both of those teams. That was still a November matchup. That was a November 11th matchup. So those teams got through two full months undefeated.
Hell,
Credit to both of them.
Different times, my friend. Different times.
It's yeah. No, I think it's probably a pretty fair analysis of this whole thing. I think everything about those games probably looked a little bit different than what we're going to be seeing on Saturday between these two teams. Nick, I've got to say, before we wrap up, we're going to get into the Civil War stories like we like to do every year, and we talk a little bit about our experiences with these matchups. But before we do that, why don't we go through a little bit of the keys to this game, some of the things that Oregon's definitely going to need to bring to the table in order to walk out of Corvallis with a victory. What are some of the necessities for the Ducks this weekend?
Yeah, obviously, first and foremost, the communication and cohesion between the offensive line and quarterback. when you go on the road, it's a totally different situation than how you communicate at home, and that's going to be really, really important to see how we handle that up front. Also, same kind of attributes. You got to apply that to special teams, like you talked about with kick coverage and punt coverage. We really got to see those execute and not have mistakes. Not asking for the big plays that we needed to win last week's game. They'd be nice, but go out there, win the game of field position on the road. Do not put yourself in bad situations with mistakes, bad snaps. Those things can apply to offense and special teams. So that's going to be our number two. And defense, obviously, shut down the run, put them into obvious passing situations because we have the beasts to rush at quarterback, create enough pressure, and get some balls out there that are interceptable and easy to be taken back for some pick sixes in certain offensive situations where they're forced to pass.
Well, I think that's a massive key you mentioned right there. And it's something that I noticed so much throughout that Boise State game. And it's something that Oregon is going to have to do, not just this game, but throughout the rest of the season. And that's limit yards on first down.
Yeah.
Limit yards on first down. The 4-yard, 5-yard, 7-yard first down plays have to stop. This defense can't be in a position where it's second and medium, third and short regularly. That's going to be disastrous. That's going to be a problem against a team like Oregon State that wants to just hold on to that ball as long as possible, grind you down, tire out your defense, and then be able to pop those big runs later in the game. Also, on that defensive side, really just forcing their passers to have to make plays would be huge. Make McCoy throw up the kind of pass that has to beat. See if he's capable of beating Jabbar Muhammad. See if he's capable of beating Nico Reed. See if he's capable of beating Brandon Johnson. If he is, credit to him. That's something that I don't think anybody saw coming. But if you walk out of this game having been beaten or really haven't even won in a close game because you weren't able to manage time of possession, because you weren't able to manage the lines of scrimmage, there are going to be a cavalcade of problems to deal with come the upcoming bye.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's a great point there. There is a bye week after this week, so no reason not to throw everything on the table to get the road win.
And getting the road win is something that I think this Oregon team, I think it'll do them a lot of confidence. I think it'll do them a lot of really just instilling the type of confidence this team is going to need, especially later in the year with some of those road trips they're going to have to make, some of the difficult stops along this Big Ten tour that are going to be required. We'll get to our predictions in just a little while, but Nick, we're talking about a game at Reser Stadium. I figured it'd be a fun time to go over some Reser Stadium memories, some fun ones that we can remember having been a part of, having been at. I have a feeling I know some of the ones you might bring up, but I'd love to hear from your perspective a little bit about your experience in Corvallis playing the Beavers.
Yeah, man, getting to go there. Some special times, but having to go there 3 times if you include the red shirt year. It's not great, not awesome, but did get to play my last career football college game there. So, some mixed memories. I've never lost a game there or experienced a loss there. So that's important because those that have, they've been pretty miserable about it. I've heard the crowds can be quite awful to deal with, and certain times they were. But yeah, a lot of favorite moments there. We'll get into those, but we've been over them on this podcast, so we'll keep them short for those longtime regular listeners. But yeah, I've got to hear first and foremost what your favorite all-time Oregon memory is.
Well, I think I've got 2 all-time favorite Oregon State memories, and they are easily the first Civil War game I was able to go to, which was the last home game as first year as a student back in 2017. Huge Oregon win, 69-10, after a year that had been a lot of up and down. Herbert had gotten injured because of that. A pretty talented roster had to kind of suffer throughout the month of October into November a little bit. Once he came back, though, for those final 2 weeks, seeing him in that offense be able to open it up, see the defense really be able to do what they were able to do against that Oregon State squad, one of the most fun memories I'll remember as an Oregon student. Just about the rivalry in general, though, I mean, it's a game that every Duck fan remembers. I know you have your stories from it, but that 2009 Civil War game, Thursday night, freezing cold. Maybe the first time that we had a remix jersey, if you will, in that game, going with the gold helmet with that green O. Maybe a little bit of inspiration for the helmet that we're going to see here coming up in a couple of weeks for Oregon. One thing about that game, though, that I think I'll always remember was watching it in like a neutral environment. We watched it at the Baghdad Theater, Portland, right off Hawthorne. We were surrounded by Ducks fans, Beaver fans. They're playing it up on the big movie theater screen. And just the atmosphere in that place, especially for a kid just getting into Oregon football for the first time. I remember the year before that, your redshirt year down there. I remember listening to that game on the radio on the floor in my room. So just the next step of the next year, being able to like be watching it, be a part of that fan atmosphere, that was so much fun. And that really just showed me and taught me how much that rivalry means to people here in the state of Oregon.
Yeah, well, that's always going to be one of mine, but I'm going to keep all three of mine at Reser Stadium for the sake of this week because I've had a lot of good memories there. But two good memories, one not so good. One I'll always remember though, and I will keep in my naughty list for the long term. There is the game you were just mentioning, the 2008 game, going on the road when I was a redshirt and getting the win to take away the opportunity for the Beavers to go to the Rose Bowl. Certainly was awesome, especially in the way we did it. Huge explosive plays, big day from Jeremiah Johnson. And just like I told him at this spring game when I saw him last, every time I see his smile, I still hear that one lady going, no, no. I don't know if that's the tinnitus hits from football or listening to loud music, but I still hear it ringing every time I see his smile. I'm like, oh yeah, he's still going for 83 yards, I believe. Oh my goodness. That one will live rent free in Beavers' heads forever. And that one obviously, and then getting to be on the field when Jerry Allen is making the call and
Oh
he's
yeah.
starting to break down, and the Ducks are going to the national championship game. And yeah, go into that one corner with all our fans. That was just such a really special moment at Reeser, except for the whoever tried to set the shirt on fire or whatever, and got a little got some fans in trouble. Other than that, awesome, really great opportunity. And the one negative, never forget, my very last game as we're going in at halftime. We know we're going to beat the Beavers' asses, but the one guy having to stand there, and the one good thing he got out of that day was getting to stand there and say, "No, Natty, no, Natty, no, Natty." And to this day, like if I saw that guy again, man, probably give him a piece of my mind.
So Nick, I got to ask you, this is a very once a duck question here, but of those three road games at Oregon State,
Yeah.
favorite uniform combo with three. For those that don't remember, green helmet over the white silver plate jersey and white pants in '08.
No.
2010, carbon fiber helmet with the white O, white and silver jersey, gray pants. 2012, yellow helmet with chrome wings, white jersey with silver, yellow pants. Which one was your favorite?
Yeah, it's probably the last one. I just
You've mentioned that
because
linemen like wearing yellow.
well, yeah, I prefer it over the white pants, that's for sure. But yeah, of the road games, but and I've heard it echoed by some fans out there. I do love when the rivalry games go color on color, and this is one of those games where I think, both teams should put aside whatever if they still have the timeout penalty. Both teams should agree that like it should routinely be color on color in this rivalry.
Well, you know what? I would be very inclined to agree with you from a style standpoint if Oregon's last two trips to Corvallis hadn't been a loss wearing yellow and a loss wearing green. Maybe the white
Fair.
jersey would do some good after the last two times there.
You're not wrong, my friend. But again, you're the more superstitious of the two, so especially with jerseys. So,
Well, speaking of which, the only time that Oregon's worn this uniform combination in Corvallis,
ooh, you're gonna have to tell me.
2016. The only
Oh,
time Oregon's ever gone green helmet, white jersey, green pants in Corvallis.
oh wow, wow,
So,
yeah.
just look at it as an opportunity to to write one of the better combos Oregon has in there. I
Yeah.
love it.
Well, and to remix the history on that uniform combination.
Absolutely. Nick, before we get out of here, we got to go over some score predictions here. What are you seeing from this Oregon State rivalry game? Credit to you. You got 37 last week. Perfect. You knew
Yeah.
Oregon was getting 37. You nailed that.
Yeah, man. I've been thinking about it, doing a lot of calculus, geometry, trying to figure out something in the 10th dimension to tell me exactly what I should expect from this game. Should I expect the same kind of issues on offense and see them perhaps amplified on the road with the first road game for this team? Or do I expect kind of the tenacity of this team to finally stand out and overpower an opponent you should outmatch on paper? I'm really, really leaning towards the latter. I want to see the aggression of this defense show up on the road and make a lot of problems for this Oregon State offense because I don't think that they've been challenged quite as much as they're going to be up front this Saturday. I'm leaning towards go Duckies 31, Beavers 17. That's my final score prediction. I think it might be another one of these where in the first half we're a little bit frustrated, but if we go into halftime, figure some things out, and get everybody on the same page, I'm confident we have the athletes and the coaching to sufficiently put this game away in the third and fourth quarter. What about you, Sam?
Nick, I like your thinking on this one. I do think that it's at least a little bit more low scoring from Oregon's perspective, just because I think Oregon State is going to do a very good job of holding on to that ball and just kind of slowing this game down, making it a little bit more difficult to deal with. That being said, though, I do see Oregon probably being able to come out of this one. Let's go with a. I'm going to use the same score 2 weeks in a row. That's but 34-24. I think Oregon gets out of here with about a 10-point win. I think that is an improvement over what we saw the last 2 weeks, frankly. And despite maybe a little bit giving up a little bit more than you'd want to, this Oregon State team, they're able to score touchdowns on the ground, especially late in ball games. I wouldn't be surprised at all if Oregon's up maybe 31-14 heading to the fourth quarter, something along those lines. By the end of it, it looks a little closer than that. Either way, I see Oregon getting out of here, getting to the bye 3-0.
Well, those were our score predictions. We want to know what you guys think down in the comments or on all our social media platforms. You can find us at Once a Duck or individually at Nick Arcody, at Samuel101TS. And Sam, I mean, besides predictions of the score, what else are you excited to see at college football this Saturday?
Man, it's going to be a fun week in general. I'm lucky enough to be headed down to Corvallis. I'm going to be hanging out with some family friends that are actually Corvallis students, Oregon State students. So look out for the green blob in the student section. That'll be me down there in Corvallis this coming week. I'm just looking forward to the atmosphere, looking forward to the game. There's going to be some great games on college football around the country in general, as there are every single week. Obviously, the Apple Cup will be a ton of fun to check out and watch. That'll be a great one happening over on Peacock. Besides that, though, should just be a great week for college football, a great week for Big Ten football, we hope.
Yeah, excited to see how Wisconsin matches up with Alabama there on that note. Hopefully a little bit better than Michigan did with Texas, but I have my lack of confidence in that. But not our Duckies. I'm excited for this game. I will be either watching it from the official U of O Seattle Ducks watch party at GameWorks or at one of the official watch area bars there at Wits End in the Greenwood area of Seattle. So any of the Seattle Ducks, let me know what you're going to be at. That might influence my decision. And as always, once a duck, always a duck.